Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this. I hope you're having a really good day. As the title slide says, we're reviewing everything and probably saying something new, part two. It's an attempt to review material presented throughout the entire semester so far and present a little new material just because we can. As always, all the borrowed images and quoted text are used for educational purposes. I'm not trying to break any rules. I'm probably trying to get by on a technicality. But once again, the ultimate goal is to just help students in my class stay awake and see something on the slide besides text. Let's review arguments. Most of the text from here has been stolen, paraphrased, adapted from the book Everything's an Argument. First of all, just remember that the basics of an argument are more than just critical thinking within the inductive and deductive reasoning. You are going to have to make some claims. You're going to have to explain the contexts. You're going to have to defend assumptions. Since I'm recording this in 2023 during the cause and effect essay, and two of the prompts are about speculation, certainly you're going to have to make assumptions and defend them. You're going to have to offer convincing evidence. It doesn't have to be research based, it can be logically based. Remember to think about your audiences. Mentioned that in the previous review and something new presentation. Who's the audience? And whether it's for class or for your Aunt Sally or for a boss, what do they want? What do they need? As you go through, make sure you're considering the counter arguments. We talked about that way back at the very, very beginning of class. Think through the counter arguments. That's part of how to think. And hopefully, all through the semester, step by step, what's the structure that best moves your arguments forward? When I talk about claim data warrant, the Tolman argument is basically what I'm doing. I'm offering an idea of a claim. Perhaps, as I talked about in the previous cause and effect video, you have some qualifiers. You have data, which are the reason and evidence. You have warrants. You maybe have to back up your warrants as you're making an argument. But the warrants in particular are the key. You don't repeat the claims, you add another warrant, you add more evidence. The claim takes a stand. I believe this. And I think you can add a because. The first draft, the first idea, especially for the speculative essays, might be pretty broad. What would happen if the space aliens landed in Yankton, South Dakota? Will AI create a dystopia? Will it create a utopia? Your answers to those questions, those first claims might be broad, and you're going to have to work to narrow them down. Again, the qualifiers, I gave a list of them in the previous one, arguably wasn't on that list. In general, perhaps avoid words like absolutely. Think about rather. You know, think about quite. You can go with extremely, but that isn't the same as absolutely or always. Slightly. Again, typically, possibly, few, many, often, but not always, not ever, not absolutely. Think about the reasons and the evidence. Pretend you're the detective. What does the evidence lead you to? And again, that evidence can be personal experience. That was the narrative essay. It can be anecdotes. That might be part of some of the social media essays that we've dealt with here. You can find a fact or two, but again, remember that in the context of this presentation, We're talking about papers that aren't research papers. So the facts and the authorities should be limited in this one as you go through the evidence. But remember, it provides reasons for the claim that you're making, and it should be something that logically leads your readers to come to the same conclusion that you have come to. The warrants. I think in some ways this is the most important slide I'm going to throw out all semester. You have to connect the claim to the data. And you have to explain, how do I get from the data to the claim? You as a writer should look at your unstated assumptions and make sure that they're not getting in the way of discovering the truth. And ever so often, you may need to back up your warrant with some evidence as well. But please make sure that those first two things are done in every paper. Connect the claim to the data, explain how you got from the data to the claim. And I would urge you, as part of a thinking human being, as part of being a thinking human being, as part of being an educated human being, you look at your unstated assumptions and you work to make sure they don't get in the way of the points you're trying to make. Quick reminder, basic essay format. Have some kind of a hook. Get the reader's attention. Go through some major points. Just funnel yourself down to a thesis. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with cutting through all of that, having your thesis statement right at the beginning, listing your major points, and getting to it. That second option, if you're writing an essay test, absolutely would be the quickest and easiest way to do that. And even I think on this cause and effect essay, if you don't want to try the hook, you don't want to try to get people's attention, it's a pretty good option, again, especially if you're speculating. Couple of quick reminders. The topic should follow the order presented in the introduction. Change the introduction if the paper doesn't flow the way you want it to. Right? If you're going to put it together in a different order, just change the introduction. Make sure that each paragraph has a topic sentence and that the paragraph develops the topic sentence. Paragraphs are ideal for the claim data warrant. Make sure you do that. And why? Explain. And you'll see the next point, explain some more. And I probably should add another bullet point, explain some more. Don't let your reader think about what your conclusion is. Tell your reader what the conclusion is. Lead him or her by the hand to that conclusion. Remember to sum it all up, restate the thesis, provide your final observation and ending, tie it all together. Okay? Tie it all together. As Wonder Woman says, with the biggest ropes and chains you can find. Quick reminder about the thesis. Number 1, view the prompt as a question. The thesis statement should answer that question. Number 2, provide that roadmap for you as a writer and the reader. It should be illuminating. And within that illumination, at least in my mind's eye, according to that picture, it's sort of got a funnel. The filaments funnel down as they go here. Nobody can write a thesis that everybody agrees with. People are going to dispute your thesis all the time. That's fine. It's your idea. Stick with it. As long as you've got the data and as long as you provide the warrants, stick with it. And finally, As much as I want people to be innovative, remember the expectations of your reader. Put it near the end of the first paragraph. Let your readers find it. Let your readers know what they're getting. Body paragraphs. I think I've covered this quite a bit, but they are the building blocks. Make sure they're related to the thesis. Make sure each one has one idea. Follow a specific order. I'm not going to spend tons of time on this one. Just make sure that the paragraphs are a group of sentences, not a single sentence. And make sure they build your paper from the bottom up. Provide the foundation for your paper. And think about how everything comes together. How the purpose of your paper answers the topic. How your answer to the topic provides the needs of the audience. And how you, as a writer, retain your voice. How you make sure that you have developed an idea and carried it through to the very end. And think about the context you're writing in. You're all writing in an academic setting. The words gonnas and shouldas can't be in there. That's just a step one. Think about the context. It's different if you're writing an email or a text. What's the context, and how do you as a writer meet the needs of your audience? How do you fulfill your purpose? And how do you deal with the topic at hand? Let's review a couple other things about the writer. A lot of these things you probably talked about in speech class, but we'll review them anyway. Remember that there's ethos, pathos, and logos. Pathos is an appeal to the emotion. You've got happy people in the picture. You've got a big turkey, which implies celebration. You've got grandpa and grandma and the whole family. And you've got joy unspeakable. We're appealing to the emotions. We're trying to get the emotional feel of Thanksgiving, avoiding the reality that everybody's going to scream and shout at each other about politics or football or whatever. As you deal with emotions, make sure you're not trying to play a puppet master. Make sure you're not trying to dangle kittens and puppies in front of them when it's a much more serious topic than kittens and puppies. How are the readers going to feel? And how will your attempts to appeal to their emotions affect your ability to persuade? Remember, readers want to be persuaded, readers want to be led to a conclusion, but they don't want to feel as if they're being jerked around. When you're playing with their emotions, that's what they feel like. Ethos. It's an appeal based on the speaker's or writer's credibility. When I was a debate coach, the male debaters wore the suit and tie because that made them look more credible. The previous slide talked about not playing with people's emotions. That's a way to hurt the ethos. When you're writing, spelling and grammar are part of the ethos. Making sure that you have a solid warrant is part of the ethos. Audiences are going to look at the character, and they're going to determine whether the sender of a message is credible. And that credibility might well depend on integrity and expertise. It might imply be on the mood or whatever all else. If everything's a comic, if everything's a joke, credibility is gone. Remember that the whole idea here is to have successful communication, to have a successful argument. You have to have a message, you have to have a sender. The sender has to put that message into a code that the recipient will understand, and the recipient has to be able to decode that message. All of that is part of the character and authority of the writer. You have to do that, and it ties back to the context. Ethos, you have to respect the audience. You have to demonstrate you know what you're talking about. And you have to be clear about your motives. Your motives for this class are you want to get an A. You still have to demonstrate expertise. In fact, that's the goal of the class, is to help you learn how to demonstrate some expertise. So even if you have something to gain, the whole purpose is to demonstrate expertise. Finally, there's logos. It's the appeal to the logic. It's the appeal to the intellect. And I think the implication for the writers is fivefold here. You have to examine the beliefs to determine why the facts seem compelling. Just because they're compelling to you doesn't mean they'll be compelling to everyone else. So, what do you believe that allows these to be compelling? And in the context of your paper, what will your audience believe? Do you know enough? You know why you play the video game for this assignment. You probably know enough about AI and space aliens to make an educated guess about what would happen if space aliens landed in Yankton. Don't be an echo chamber. Be your own person. Check the facts. This is not a research paper, but don't throw something in you heard from TikTok either. And again, please remember, most people claim social media still matter, or excuse me, most people claim that facts still matter. A couple of other things. Work to avoid confirmation bias. Work to avoid assuming that stuff you agree with is automatically correct. Work to avoid rejecting stuff that you disagree with. Confirmation bias gets in the way of the speculation you have to do for an essay like the cause and effect. Any of the research that you're doing, if you're only looking for the details that matter to you because you agree with them, confirmation bias destroys that. Number two, confirmation bias a lot of times comes from the fact that we all think we have a tendency to know more than we actually do. We have this tendency. We think we know more than we actually do. We talked about that on day 1 or day 2 of class. It's possible to know a little bit about a great deal of stuff, but that also makes it impossible to know what we actually know. The Will Rogers quotation, which he may or may not have said, but I think it's true. It's not what you don't know that will kill you, it's what you know that ain't really so. We don't always know what we don't know. Make sure we have checked out all of the things we possibly can. And again, make sure we've eliminated this is here because I agree with it. I think it's important to understand that you usually need all three. You need logos, you need pathos, and you need your ethos. The whole idea of Star Trek, I think, was Spock's logos, Kirk's pathos, and Dr. McCoy telling them to check themselves. Didn't always work. McCoy sometimes got heavy into the pathos as well, but it's still, I think, all three as you're going through a paper. Textbook also agrees with that. Find the balance, especially again when you're doing the speculation essay. And then finally, the timeliness. What's the moment that you can capture in words to make it applicable, to make it appropriate, to make it fit the situation? The AI one, the social media one, the video game one, all might be a situation where you have an opportunity to make an important a point for a particular audience. Think about how you can make that point happen. And then to totally switch gears for a second, I didn't have a good place to put this. Remember that humor done well will make people suspend their prejudices, will make people move beyond some of the confirmation bias that they want. Humor done poorly, where you have to ask, why don't more people appreciate your sense of humor, will create a situation where you're trying to explain the joke instead of trying to make the point that the joke was supposed to make for you. Be careful with the use of humor, especially, as I've said in a couple other presentations, satire and sarcasm. I think that should wrap this one up. Hope to see you all in class the next class period, and I hope you have a wonderful day.